No, tell me where. If it's
That's
not the
right.
United States, there's nowhere to go right now.
We go to partly to the euro.
Yeah.
We are not going to, very little to Japan, Australia, New Zealand. The RMP, the Chinese yuan, is highly controlled. They can make it go up, they can make it go down, and you're not quite sure which way it's going to go. Whereas in the U.S., you can look at the figures and you can read the federal reports every time they make a decision, and you can make your guess.
You also said that China and the United States, they both have to change their mindset.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Well, for the Americans, you've got to cease to think in terms of the Chinese as of they are today. Exactly. The Chinese as they are today are people who have been suffering for a very long time, especially under Mao, and who feel that the world is cruel to them. And therefore, they're very edgy. The Chinese, if you talk to the Chinese leaders now, those over 60, they're all with Russian as their second language.
Right.
In 20, 25 years' time, you're going to meet a generation who are now in the lower ranks, who have been to America and Britain and Europe, and will be English-speaking and have different models in their minds. And they will know that they are not going to be the sole power in the world. Not ever again. Because this is a globalized world. And they know that they are dependent on the world for their growth, the resources that they need.
So they're going to be part of the world.
Yes. Before meaning up till the time when the British and the others colonialized them in a partial way, everything grew within China. Whatever they needed, they captured territory.
Then they found global markets.
George H.W. Bush invited them to sell to America. He was the U.S. representative before they had ambassadors. And he had a liking for them. They were good to him. So he says, you sell to us. And they sold, and it succeeded. And they said, yeah, this is the way to get out of our poverty.
That was your friend Deng Xiaoping that saw that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then they got into the World Trade Center as a member, WTO. I've just met Bob Rubin today, and he and Henry Kissinger and I told him that Clinton turned down Chu Rongqi for this WTO.
Right.
So he said to him, that's a great mistake, because if you turn them down, all they will do is to be a spoiler. They'll reverse engineer all your patents, and you find generic products and imitations on the market. Now, bring them in, get them to observe the rules.
Well, that's a big if.
Yeah.
You got to get them to observe the rules.
They are going to have to observe the rules, and they will.
And they understand that.
No, because they are making patents of their own now.
They want to open the markets around the world.
That's
and
right.
be a part of the global economy.
No. They are doing research almost in every sector now, including life sciences.
Here's which is something that Singapore got involved in very much with stem cell. Why did you do that?
Well, we figured out that with these smart fellows around, and so many of them, whatever we do, they will do in time and better. But there are some areas where they will take a very long time to be able to do what we are doing. And that's to change the system from opacity to transparency, from no protection for copyright to protection for copyright, and rule of law. There are two rules of law in China, one for the ordinary citizen and the other for 76 million members of the Communist Party. And the judges will do what they know what the leaders require to keep the country stable. So would you... Look, we've got all the big pharma companies in Singapore.
Yes.
They're not in China. They will sell their products.
Because you have protection, you have rule of law, you have protection of patents.
And we're doing joint research with them on the effect of these new drugs on various types, racial types of the population.
Can you make an argument that a country who leads in technology and science, it will go a long way in terms of their place in the world?
Yes, of course. That's why I think the U.S. will stay a very powerful and considerable inventor and creator of new products.
When you look at the U.S. and its relationship and its concern about oil and its politics in the Middle East, you think it's a distraction? You think that it...
No, I'm not saying the Middle East is a distraction. I think trying to make a country out of Afghanistan is a distraction. There was no country for the last 30, 40 years. They've just been fighting each other since the last king was chased out.
Right.
How on earth are you going to put these little bits together? It's not possible.
So therefore you do what?
I'm not an expert, but in my simple mind, it strikes me that you won in Iraq, you won in Afghanistan, not because you fought the Taliban, but because you got the Northern Alliance to fight them.
Exactly.
And you provided the Northern Alliance with intelligence and the capabilities to bomb them and target them. And they captured the South. Now,
yeah, but I mean, they've got governance problems over there, too.
That's all right, but that's their problem. Why do you want to make it your problem?
So what would you do? Would you pull all the troops out and let whatever happens to Afghanistan happens to Afghanistan? It's not that threatening to the United States. Is that the argument?
I don't know about that, because I think it cannot be more difficult for the United States than to have your troops stuck there. The Russians are a brutal, ruthless, so a lot of army people. Right. 120,000 of them were there. But they had to leave.
Yeah. And we helped that because we supported the Mujahideen.
Yeah.
The Mujahideen had a lot of support from around the world who wanted to see the Soviet Union take it.
Yeah. But whether or not the Soviets helped them to get the Americans out, I think the Americans and the NATO troops, the NATO members are very skeptical of the outcome.
Even to the point of not wanting to send their troops in certain kinds of combat areas.
Quite right.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, because you get shot for nothing.
But those who argue that if Afghanistan is abandoned, first of all, the world will say, or people will say, look, you left Afghanistan once before after the Soviets had left, and now you're leaving again. The United States has to stand for something, and it has to show that it's prepared to stay.
Yeah, no.
You don't buy that at all.
No.
Look.
You know,
you must have a wonderful conversation with your friend Henry Kissinger then.
No.
Oh, stop there, though. Where do you and Henry Kissinger differ on a view of the U.S. role in the world?
I don't think there's any difference.
Is that right? How would you define it then?
I think the U.S. can be a benign stabilizer of the world order.
A benign stabilizer?
Yes. Without the U.S., East Asia would never have grown. You brought peace and technology, trade and investments, and East Asia flourished.
Well, that's clear. It's happened in East Asia. Yeah, you're talking about Singapore and North and South Korea.
No,
and
absolutely. So, and if you're not there,
how do we do that in the Middle East? How do we do that when you've got the kind of conflict that's taking place?
You can't solve all the problems in the world. Some problems just got to be resolved by the
And so what are your priorities?
For Singapore?
No, for the United States. What should be the priorities?
I cannot think. I'm not an American. I do not calculate in American terms. I calculate what Americans are likely to do in relation to what will happen to me.
Yeah. Well, that's why they listen to you. That's why you're going to see Mr. Bernanke tomorrow, and that's why you're going to see Larry Summers, and that's why you're going to see all these American officials. They want to know how you assess the way the world is working today. And your central message is you got to engage,